Yeah, fantastic to have a chance to be with you this morning. And so I wanted to talk a bit this morning, inspired by a quote from someone who's famous in the DevOps space, the sort of technical space that I was in. He was an old thinker in terms of industrial process optimization. He was trained as a physicist originally, and there was a quote that he'd said on a number of occasions that he said, in physics, there are no problems. There are no problems. Problems are a human thing where humans are not happy for whatever reason. In physics, everything is always perfect in the sense that everything is a perfectly situated between the balance of whatever forces are happening at that time. So if you think about the physics of a cloud, right, it's like a certain amount of water vapor and light and temperature and air currents. And if we think about our life circumstances in one sense, when we look at each other, we just see this isolated person, right? Like you see me, and I see we have some boundaries here, and I see you, and we don't see each other's history. For example, we don't see each other's parents, family, or society, or influence. We don't see all the complexity happening inside our body or inside our mind, whatever. But whatever we are at any given moment is always perfect in the sense that it is perfectly arising from all of these factors, right? Like our DNA meets, our parents, our DNA, or whatever DNA comes from our parents, we eventually identify as me as we gradually get some sense of self-awareness. And that genetic person unfolds in the context of a certain social environment and so forth. And so on some profound level, everything is perfect exactly the way it is. Now, what's not perfect is how we feel about everything. That doesn't feel perfect. It feels undesirable. A whole lot of our experience feels undesirable. I've got a hint of a headache this morning, and I sure wish it wasn't there. We've got, difficult situations in our family and work, and there's lots of these things that we wish were different. And because of wishing for things to be different, then we apply effort and we help to change things, and maybe we create an environment where everybody feels better about that situation. But both things can be true simultaneously, right? Everything can be perfect exactly the way it is. And we can also have a motivation or a wish to change, because that wish and that motivation is also perfect in this sense. It's rising from empathy. For example, if you see someone suffering or in pain, out of empathy for them, a wish arises to help. And that wish is just arising from your own natural inclination and sensitivity to others' pain, and so there's a sense in which, although it feels like we're trying to protect and perfect the external world, we're the external world in a sense is already perfect. It's just not necessarily desirable. It's not necessarily the way we would desire it for ourselves or for others. And then this question of how do we make things better? So partly it is this question of how to help humans, ourselves and others, to find peace with our circumstances. So someone last night asked me to, what is spirituality? She was saying everybody on their dating profiles, they're always like, I'm very spiritual. She's like, what does that mean? Spiritual. And my explanation, at least, was that spiritual means that at some points throughout your life, you have had experiences that were totally um, outside of the ordinary social external interactions, social status and how do we look and what are we supposed to do, and that we've had some experiences that felt utterly different from and better than the normal mode in our mind of just going through our social interaction, going through our day, the things we're normally concerned about, that you've had, that something has touched you at presumably at least one, probably multiple times in your life. Something's really touched you and moved you deeply, not through the force of taking drugs or having like near-death experiences, or well, maybe, but something's really moved you, and you didn't want to attach that experience to a traditional religious name. Like if you have an affinity for a particular traditional religious group, you have some experience and you think, this has taken me closer to God, or this has taken me, helped me to realize my soul, or you might put some words to it. But if you're not comfortable aligning with one of those existing social groups, then spiritual is sort of a nice term you can label that, and still makes reference to that special experience without necessarily aligning with a traditional viewpoint on what is profound and what is beyond the ordinary and what is most special and meaningful for human beings. So, but all of that is based around just us getting out of our normal way of seeing the world that is so caught up in the fear of how other people perceive us, and fear of, are we going to survive? Are we going to do okay? And all of these normal fears that drive us and preoccupy us and fill our minds, and cause us so much worry and frustration and stress and so forth. One way or another, we do need to find a deeper, more stable place where we can rest and be at peace, to use words that Eileen had used earlier, rest and be at peace, and endure the, all of the conflict and the stress and so forth. And so whether we give it a name or don't give it a name, I would say that the essential point is applying some effort to change our mind and change our actions, change our mind and change our actions. And when we change our mind, that can mean in very, 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 very deep ways. So changing our mind can be very superficial. I didn't like to eat sweet potato. I didn't used to like sweet potatoes. Now I like sweet potatoes. Very superficial change in the mind. But if we change our mind on a deeper level, I used to think I was very different from everybody else. Now I really realize that I'm basically the same as everybody else. And like those kinds of deep changes in the mind, they really move us. They really help us to get totally different perspective on the world, to experience and engage with the world in a totally different way that's just a bit easier, nicer, less full of these psychological problems, and more at peace with the world, in the sense that we're not fighting against what we're seeing. We're perhaps understanding it, we're accepting it, we're at peace, and then able to, take whatever actions we think will be most beneficial. So just a bit of context. But what we can do is just begin with a bit of meditation as usual, and going into this concept of everything is perfect on one level, as we go into the meditation. So as usual, our opportunity here is to recalibrate our thoughts and our experience. We sit with our back upright but relaxed. We take a deep breath in and out. Another deep breath, and just ask ourselves what is important right now. Or we take another deep breath and invite ourselves to relax. And then another deep breath and just asking ourselves what is important right now. And as we take a deep breath in and out, we begin to feel our body. Wherever there is warmth or coldness. One characteristic of our body is that there is no gap between our bodily sensations and between the mind, the bodily awareness that is feeling things and what we are feeling. They're always in contact. There's no gap. When we see things with our eyes, they appear distant. But when we touch, just by definition, there is no distance between the objects and our body. So we feel the seat beneath us. And we can ask, are we feeling the seat? Are we feeling our body? Pressure on our body? Is there any difference? And the feelings in our body, are they internal or external? And we can recall this quote in physics, there are no problems. The position of our body is exactly perfect based on the forces that are impinging on us. The temperature, the dryness or moistness of our skin, tightness or looseness of our muscles and joints. The largeness or smallness of our bodies. Every cell in our body is perfectly arisen from the conditions that it's been subject to. 37 trillion cells in the human body. Inconceivable, like stars in space. Infinite complexity. And all perfect in its own way. Each breath coming in and out is not even conscious, particularly. We don't even know consciously how to breathe, what muscles to activate in our diaphragm. The body takes care of itself. And we watch each breath like the tides of the ocean, waves coming in and out. In physics, there are no problems. Problems are just human feelings of pain that naturally gives rise to a wish to change, which is just a human desire. And all of these are also exactly perfect. Our feelings, wishes, perceptions. And if we want to make a change, we have to first clearly understand how the world works, how we work. The mind wishing things were other than the way they are creates unhappiness. Unhappiness from just denying present reality, current state. Doesn't make it more powerful, more easily for us to fix things. The mind not accepting present reality just causes pain for us and others. So with this, we bring to mind all of the people who have helped us to be here now, whether we like them or dislike them. Imagine all of the people who have shaped our life. We are the way we are because of their influence. And they are the way they are because of countless other influences. None of us has chosen. None of us has chosen or controls this world, our life. When we do not accept the world, it appears unattractive, undesirable. Literally, we don't desire the world that we're in. But here in our imagination, we imagine that we are in a beautiful, peaceful, uplifting environment that arises through our complete acceptance. A perfect environment coming through realizing that everything is perfect. And then we imagine that these people around us are friends, family, colleagues, that they are peaceful, happy, smiling, and delighted to be engaging in meditation along with us. All of us experiencing peace. And then with this feeling of warmth and connection to others, we naturally allow this shared wish for everyone to experience happiness and peace to grow in our hearts. There's no difference between our own wish to be happy and others' wish to be happy. They're one shared wish. So develop a strong, strong wish that others be happy and free from suffering, the same as we want ourselves to be happy and free from suffering. And then develop wish that to bring benefit to ourselves and others, we wish to listen deeply, take these teachings to heart, improve our own good qualities for the sake of others. And then with this motivation, we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. So I had a very nice conversation last night, sort of along these same lines with someone that I'd met in a work context, and I have some natural tendency to drag any conversation that I get into like philosophy. So, you know, for better, I'm not sure. Some people may like that, some people may not like that, but every conversation that I'm in ends up going into philosophy. But then she had taken the conversation into philosophy faster and deeper than I had just to begin. And I was recalling this one figure that I'd mentioned in the past, that the human brain processes 11 million bytes per second of information is estimated, and 10 million bytes per second of that information is visual. These are sort of rough estimates, but so our visual processing for human beings is massive, much bigger than, dogs have all this smell, thought going on. We've got this visual processing. 1 million bytes per second of information are other sensory data, feelings, smells, tastes, hearing, and so forth, and about our conscious capacity, our capacity for conscious reasoning and thinking and so forth, has about 40 bytes per second of information processing. So if like me, you're kind of in the computer world and you think about a system, computer network that has 40 bytes per second of processing power, that's a little bit sad. That's like 1960s level computing power, 1970s maybe. It's not that much. So our conscious ability to make a model of the world and figure out who we are and what's going on is really just takes a lot of energy. It's really important. It's a very powerful capacity that we have, but it's not the majority of our thinking. The majority of our thinking is done unconsciously, for one thing. And we necessarily have to simplify everything infinitely. We have to simplify everything infinitely just to be able to think. Like, and one of those bytes per second of information is always who we are. Right? There's always this one sense, like I'm doing this, this happened to me, and so we tell this whole story using that bits of information. We tell this whole story about who we are, where we are, what's going on, this conscious story, and all of our talking comes from that conscious processing. But necessarily within that, we're ignoring. But necessarily within that, it's fictitious. Like we so dramatically oversimplify the world that it's a fiction that we live in. But this fiction can either be one in which we feel happy and peaceful, or a fiction in which we feel unhappy and miserable and powerless and so forth. So that in this sense, our waking reality is likened to a dream, in the sense that a dream, is constructed by the mind, and can either be a great dream or a nightmare, but it's still, one way or another, it's all kind of constructed by the mind. So we have this, we construct a vision of who we are and where we fit in and what's going on and so forth. But if we shift our point of view, for example, thinking everything's perfect, in physics there are no problems, for example, it can cause us to just recalibrate and just think, wow, well, that's a very different way of thinking about things. And when we change our way of thinking, like I said earlier, the essence of what we really need to do is changing our mind and changing our actions. And of course, if you change your mind, your actions will naturally change as well. But some of the deepest ways to change our mind are to just recalibrate, to feel, for example, a kind of acceptance of the way that the world is, and so forth, and a kind of respect within that everything's arising for its various reasons through causes and conditions that we can't begin to understand, but we can have humility and respect. And I think there is an infinite amount of complaining that we can do, of course, about the difficulties in our own life, the difficulties in the world. And complaining is relatively easy because it doesn't take having a solution to things, just takes having a negative feeling and having a voice. And so the the complaining that we tend to do is um, can be useful if we're voicing something that no one is talking about, that everybody's afraid to mention. Like sometimes there's a silence that can be not helpful, and like if you broach an unpleasant subject, sometimes people are very grateful to hear, oh yes, glad to know that there's someone else who's observing this. Um, but complaining itself doesn't contain a solution within it. So we think if we want to actually change things, you have to understand how they work, and so then figuring out where we can apply leverage and how we can help to shift the way our world works, the way our mind works, the way other people work, the way, all of that takes a beginning with acceptance and then just applying some leverage or pressure in the appropriate places to begin to shift things. And so just basically thinking of patience and acceptance as a foundation, not for apathy, but for making effective change without feeling burned out or frustrated by the sense that we're living in such a profoundly imperfect world. So anyway, so just some thoughts for this morning. So why don't we take a minute just to reflect on this? Any aspects of this that you found useful, you can just think these thoughts, these lines of thought, they are deepening pathways within my own mind that can lead me to a profoundly different way of thinking and acting. And these pathways are not truly different from the pathways within everyone else's mind. Really, I'm treading a path so that others can follow. I'm thinking about the world in a very different ways so that others can more easily follow. And although the world is perfect right now, exactly as it is, we can imagine a world where we as human beings have a more perfect way of experiencing the world, a way of experiencing the world less characterized by struggle, conflict, fighting. And then we can open our eyes and arise.